Hey party people, Techno here, back again at the Sans Holiday Hack Challenge 2022. In this video, we're going to be tackling the third and final challenge to retrieve the Elfin Ring. In the last video, we helped Tinsel here with a container escape problem in this prison escape terminal. And for this video, our challenge is going to be the Jolly CI/CD. So this is 5 Christmas trees out of 5, rated as a highest difficulty problem in the Holiday Hack Challenge. And our objective here is to exploit a CI/CD pipeline and get hints for this challenge from Tinsel up a tree in the Elfin Ring. Cool. Well, yeah, in his gratitude for our help in the last video, Tinsel has given us some good information about what lies ahead. And if we talk to Tinsel, he's going to tell us about how they've been using this new technology called continuous integration and continuous deployment to iterate and innovate quickly. So a GitLab runner effectively fetches all commits made to a repo and pushes them into production automatically. And Tinsel also lets it slip that he didn't mean to commit something, whoops, to this GitLab repo. So that's something we might want to remember for future use. Tinsel also provides us with a couple hints here as well for our objective, and let's take a look at those. So first we have switching hats. If you find a way to impersonate another identity, you might try recloning a repo with their credentials. Okay, that's a big sort of push in the direction we need to head. And then we also have committing to mistakes. The thing about Git is that every step of development is accessible, even steps you didn't mean to take. And then we have the command git log, which can show code skeletons. So that's also a huge hint here, in that this command is going to be critical to us finding what we need to solve this challenge. So we'll stick that in our back pocket, and let's climb up this ladder and let's have a chat with Ripon Proudboot. So Ripon, if I remember correctly, basically reiterates the GitLab repo that we need to connect to, tells us a little bit of backstory here that we're going to get in the upcoming message in the terminal. So I'm just going to jump right into the terminal and let's get started on this final challenge to get the Elfin Ring. Now this challenge in particular does have a lot of resources that take some time to load, so at this point I'm just going to cut the video until that time has elapsed and we have a prompt. Okay, I believe at this point those resources should be loaded, so what we have here is we have our prompt and we also have a message, and that message reads, "Greetings, noble player. Many thanks for answering our desperate cry for help. You may have heard that some evil sporks have opened up a web store selling counterfeit banners and flags of the many noble houses found in the land of the North. They have leveraged some dastardly technology to power that storefront, and this technology is known as PHP. This storefront utilizes a truly despicable amount of resources to keep the website up, and there is only a certain type of Christmas magic capable of powering such a thing, an Elfin Ring, exactly what we're after. Along with PHP, there is something new we've not yet seen in our land, a technology called continuous integration and continuous deployment. Be wary. Many fair elves have suffered greatly, but in doing so, they've managed to secure you persistent connection on an internal network. By the way, take excellent notes." So this is true because there were many times working through this challenge that I lost a connection to the terminal or the resources involved and had to start over. So definitely track what you're doing to expedite that process the next time you get that loaded up. So should you lose your connection or be discovered and evicted, the elves can work to reestablish persistence. In fact, the sound off fans, I believe that is sound of fans, and the sag and lighting tells me all the systems are booting up again right now. Please, for the sake of our holiday, help us recover the ring and save Christmas. And then we have our prompt here. Okay, so let's just do some initial sort of seeing what we're working with here. So our user is Samways, as it was in the Prison Escape Challenge. And also we are working currently in Samways' home folder. And Samways, just like in the Prison Escape Challenge, can execute all commands as a privileged user without any password. I don't think we're actually going to end up needing that for this particular challenge, but it's there if we do happen to need to use it. So the first step here, of course, is going to be to clone that repo that we've been told about, and I have that rather long URL saved over here in Notepad, and I'm just going to paste that in. So we're going to do a git clone on this internal repo, And let's take a look at what we have here and do some poking around. So let's cd into this. And if we take a look here, we just have all of the code and the assets and the resources for that web store that the sporks are selling all of that counterfeit material out of. Nothing that we're going to find in this initial clone of the repo. So this is where that git log command comes in. And just as a side note, if you've played any of the over-the-wire games, I recommend them. They're really good. But in the earlier challenges, I don't remember the particular ones, but they start to get into doing this exact kind of thing, digging through GitHub repos to find secrets and keys that were committed that should not be there. So in any case, let's go ahead and issue that git log command and see what we can find. So here we have a history of all of the commits, and we also can see down here, one of these commit messages is whoops. Well, that's exactly what Tinsel said whenever he accidentally committed something that he shouldn't have. So if this is the commit and the message that fixes that whoopsie, then that must mean that we want to look at this commit right here. So let's copy that commit. And now we're going to perform a git checkout. And we're going to put that commit identifier in there. And this is just going to give us a little message that we're in detached head state and we can switch back to the main branch and everything, all that good stuff. Irrelevant for us, really. So here, let's start looking around again. And it looks like we actually have less stuff in here. Yeah, we have the WordPress content and all of that. But if we do a little more digging and we actually look for hidden directories, check this out. It looks like we have an SSH folder in here, which wasn't in the previous commit that we looked at. That's definitely interesting. So let's see what we can find in that SSH folder. Well, it appears to be empty, but it's actually not, because that is because the files themselves are hidden as well. So if we look for hidden files, then we're going to see that we actually have a public-private key pair in here. That is really cool. That is very useful to us. Now we can just take a deeper look at those. We can cat that private key. There's our private key. And we can also take a look at this public key. And look, this public key is issued to sporks@kringlecon.com. Well, if we go back up to our commit history here, we can see that the author of these commits is Neo, but Neo is sporks@kringlecon.com. So it appears that we've actually just gotten the public and private keys that are going to give us the same access that Neo had to make changes and commit in this GitHub repo, or this GitLab repo. So with that, we definitely want to take advantage of that. Let's copy these keys out. So I'm going to do a recursive copy on that SSH directory, and I'm going to move that into my home folder. Now let's just jump back into the home folder, and we're going to do a couple things here that we're going to need to set this up to use these. So first of all, the proper permissions are not going to be set on this folder or these keys. We're going to have to address that. So let's do a chmod, a chmod, change mode, whatever you want to call it. I tend to call it chmod, like, hey, chmod, man. But chmod 700, that SSH folder. And then let's cd in there. And remember, those keys are also hidden. So just as a little quality of life thing, I'm going to move those keys to not be hidden anymore. So moving .deploy to deploy, and move .deploy.pub to deploy.pub. And then we want to put the correct permissions on those. So we're going to have to do a chmod 600 on deploy, the private key, and a chmod 644. I can't seem to type that properly, can I? Chmod 644 on the deploy.pub key. And then one last thing that we're going to have to do here is create an authorized keys file for storing any server host keys that we get. So we're just going to do a touch and then authorized _keys, and that'll be good enough to get us going there. So now let's see, again, referring back to our other hint, if we can impersonate another user, we might try recloning a repo. Well, that's exactly what we're going to do. Let's reclone this repo using these new SSH credentials, which will then give us the ability to make modifications and commits, and that's going to get us into the ability to do that exploit that we need to do to solve this challenge. So I'll just get back in my home folder here. Now, first things first, we need to make sure that we actually have an SSH agent running. So to do that, we're going to do an eval, and then we're going to do SSH agent tac s. Cool. And now we have a process ID on that SSH agent. That is perfect. And the next thing that we're going to need to do is we're actually going to have to add these keys such that we can use them to clone that repo. And to do that, we're going to do an SSH add. And we're just going to point that at the private key that we just discovered. So that's going to be in our home folder, in the SSH folder, and that's the deploy key. And now we've added that identity. Okay, next thing is next. So thinking back to the very first challenge that we did in this Elfin Ring room, we had to help Bo9Candle clone a repo. Bo was given an SSH URL and was unable to clone that because, of course, Bo didn't have the proper SSH public key to do that clone. So we had to translate that into an HTTPS repo URL. Well, we need to do the exact opposite here. So we've been given an HTTP GitLab repo URL, and we need to translate that to the SSH equivalent, and that's going to look like this. So we're going to do a git clone for git@gitlab.flag.net.internal, and then a colon for the account, Rings of Powder, and then the actual repo that we're after, or the project that we're after, is going to be a / and then wordpress.flag.net.internal.git. Quite a mouthful there, but let's go ahead and clone that. And of course the path already exists because we cloned the SSH or the HTTP version of that. So I'm just going to go ahead and make a new directory to stick this in. So let's do make dir shell and cd into shell, and then rerun that command. And yes, we do want to accept that SSH fingerprint, and we're cloning that repo now, and cool. Now we are in a position to do some modifications and some changes to upload our exploit. And for this, we know we're working with a PHP storefront, so my first thought was, well, let's just drop a PHP reverse shell in there and then see if we can connect to that system with that method. Now, we don't have any external connectivity on this machine, so we can't reach out and like just wget a reverse shell, but of course we can create one ourselves. And to do that, let's cd into wordpress.flag.net.internal into that repo. Of course, this is all the same content that we saw before, but the major change that we can now modify it and commit it. And I'm just going to do a touch on a shell.php to create that file. And now I want to vim shell.php. So what we're going to do is we are going to go fetch the PHP reverse shell from Pentestmonkey's GitHub repo. Pretty classic PHP reverse shell that you would be familiar with working through various challenges with Kali Linux and things like that. I'm just going to copy this out, and we're going to drop that into this newly created file. And while we're in here, what we need to do then is to actually modify this so that we're pointing at the proper IP address and the proper port. But realizing that I didn't actually grab that beforehand, let me just right quit and let's do an IP all and get our IP address. So here is our IP that we're going to need to use within that folder. So we'll drop back into that PHP reverse shell. And let's just head up here to the sections we need to modify. They're commented so we can easily identify them. And here we go. So we're going to insert. We're going to place the IP address of our machine in here. And then 1234 is a fine port. There's no reason not to use that, but just out of habit, I always use quad 4s. So that's what I'm going to put in there. Now let's right quit this. And what we're going to need to do then is put this in a position that we can access it once we make this commit, and we can pull that reverse shell back. So what I'm going to do, what worked for me, was to use the login page. So let's go ahead and move WordPress login.php to WordPress login.php.old. We could really overwrite it. I think there's no reason we couldn't, but this is the steps that I took. And now we're going to move shell.php to WordPress login.php. Cool. Now a couple more things before we commit this. So we're gonna, just for some extra added, I don't know, fun, we're gonna do a git config, and let's do a user.email, and let's add sporks@kringlecon.com. And then we can also change our git username so we can be like super stealthy. If we tried to commit at this point, it would ask us for this information anyway. But let's do a git config user.name, and then we can put in that neo. Cool. Now at this point, we're going to do a git add. We're just going to add everything, and a git commit, and add our message here. This can be really anything, but let's just say adding performance improvements, because why not? All right, and now we can do a git push to get that up and running. So we've successfully pushed that commit. Our exploit is live in the website. Now at this point, what we need to do is we need to start a netcat listener. So we're going to do an lc tac lenp, and on our port 4444, and I'm going to launch this in the background because I also need to be able to do a curl command on that login.php file so that we can activate our reverse shell. So at this point, let's go ahead and get the netcat listener running. So that's running in the background, job 1. And let's finally do a curl on http wordpress.flag.net .internal, and then we're going to target that WordPress login.php file. Oh, and I made a typo here. So yeah, you definitely need to get that URL correct. So internal. All right, and now we have received a reverse shell. So I had to fiddle with this a little bit to actually get output on this. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to background this again. So background that, and then I'm going to foreground it again. And at this point, that worked for me to be able to get output on the system. So let's do jobs. And foreground 1. Okay, great. So yeah, I'm not sure why that's fiddly like that, but I had to foreground and background a couple times. But now we have output on that reverse shell that we uploaded, and we have our exploit complete. And we can see right there that we have that flag.txt file. So let's do a cat on that flag.txt, and bam, congratulations, you found the Holiday Hack Challenge 2022 Elfin Ring. And then this is the string that we're going to need to put in our badge to get that challenge solved. So personally found this to be the most enjoyable problem that I was able to solve in the 2022 Holiday Hack Challenge. I really enjoyed this one, enjoyed the process on it. And with that, we've retrieved the Elfin Ring. In the next video, we're going to start our quest to retrieve the next ring, which is the web ring, I believe. And until then, hey, thanks everyone for watching. Really appreciate it. Take care. I will talk to you later.